Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm going to be filming an updated Colourpop palette guide video. I filmed a video like this last year and I just thought it was about time to do an updated one because as you guys know, 2018 Colourpop has released so many new palettes since then. Like just looking at everything, it's so overwhelming. So I just want to kind of bring everything together, run down all of the palettes, what they are like, what are my favorites, which ones do I pick up the most, just kind of give you guys an update on everything. You guys have been requesting for this as well. I do want to give credit to the original content creator that came up with this idea and who I got this idea from. So when I filmed my video last year, I saw Andrea Matilano. I don't think I'm saying her last name right, but I'll leave her channel link down below along with her original video that I saw. If she did do an updated one, I will definitely leave that down below. All credit goes to her. I'm not taking credit for this video idea. Before we get into the video, I also just want to mention that all of the palettes that I'm going to be talking about today, I have done a separate review on it along with 3 looks. So any palette here that you guys want to know about, just type in the search bar, just type in JUDY and the palette that you want to know about, and I'm sure the video will pop up. Because we have so many palettes to talk about, I don't think the YouTube description is going to be big enough for me to fit all the links and everything like that. I also have a Colourpop playlist as well. It's on my homepage, so if you're interested in that, it's there for you. But yeah, with that being said, if you guys are interested in hearing my opinion on all of the palettes, then just continue watching. So I am going to leave timestamps down below because there are different categories that I want to go through, and I know this video is going to be super long, so I'm going to leave timestamps down below so that way it's easier for you guys to view, just in case you want to skip to a certain point. But my first category is going to be like just the original Colourpop palettes. These are not collabs, these are not discontinued, these are just Colourpop palettes. And a subcategory to this, I'm going to talk about the 12 pan palettes first. So the 12 pan palette is what they originally came out with. So the first one I have is the first original palette they came out with, which is the Yes Please. You can see my one is really beat up, very dirty. I love this palette so much. I actually hit pan on one of the shadows, which is the only shadow that I hit pan on any of my Colourpop shadows. I did use the yellow today in my eye look if you're curious. I didn't film this eye look, but if you want me to do a tutorial on it, I'll be more than happy to. I just used a bunch of Colourpop eyeshadows. So I went into Perception, I went to the I Love Cedar E, I went into Yes Please. I went into every palette, almost, not every palette, like to 4 or 5 palettes to create this look. So I didn't use just one palette. Yes Please was the palette that started it all. You get a good amount of mattes and shimmers. It's just a great palette to have, a great bright warm palette, and I can see why it is a cult favorite. Everybody loves this. I still love it. I still grab for it even like how many years later, like 2 years now, a year and a half, I still grab for it. It's still one of my palettes that I think about and I just really do love. We then have the Give It To Me Straight palette, which is also another favorite of mine. At one point, this was like my ultimate everyday palette. I just love this one so much. I love the tones. I love how everything is a little bit more like muted. It's not as bright in your face, just perfect for everyday. All these shades are great for everyday and just so sultry and warm. I love how you get some warm mattes and some berry mattes. You get a bit of everything in here. It is definitely one of my go-to Colourpop palettes. Another favorite is the Double Entendre. This is what I like to call the older sister of the Yes Please. It is very warm, but it's a little bit muted. It's like that vibe that you get from Give It To Me Straight, where it's a little bit more muted, more suitable for every day. I feel like the Yes Please palette is like the summertime palette, and the Double Entendre is kind of like the autumn palette. It's a great palette, also another palette that I go to very often. I keep it in my top drawer, use it all the time. It doesn't look like I have, but I really do, and it's one that I speak highly of. We then have Good Sport, which is a palette that I personally haven't touched since I've done my review on. And the way I like to differentiate whether I like a palette or not, because obviously I have so many Colourpop palettes, and not only Colourpop palettes, I do have other brand eyeshadow palettes too. So when I know that I like a palette a lot is when I finish my review and I keep going back to it, or I keep it in my top drawer and I want to play more with it. And with this palette, I haven't touched it since I've done my review. I mean, the shadows are very pretty, but it's just not like a palette that I would go for as much as my other ones. I want to give it like a second chance, so maybe I might take it back out, leave it on my vanity so I can just force myself to play with it and see how it goes, because the shades in here are not bad. It's just I remember having a lot of trouble with the darker purples. They were a little bit patchier, but you do get some beautiful unique shades in here, don't get me wrong. I think the patchiness of some of the purples just kind of put me off a little bit. Love Hooky, High Hopes, these greens in here. You guys know I love greens. So yeah, it's a great palette. I just don't find myself reaching for it as much, so I'm gonna try and give it another chance, create looks without the pressure of filming, and see how I go with that. Next up is You Had Me at Hello. This was the first palette I believe that came with a mirror. So any palette that has a mirror will be $2 more. That is a thing for you, that you like a mirror in your palettes, then obviously you can opt for these options. This is another palette that I don't reach for often either. It's not like the palettes aren't good or the formula is bad, because obviously the formula is really good. That's why I have literally all of the palettes. It's just more like personal preference when it comes to this, like colors that I like to see on myself and just the shades that I like. And this color scheme to me is not a color scheme that I would wear all the time. I mean, looking at it, it is very, very beautiful, but again, it's just personal preference at the end of the day. I know Good Sport, You Had Me at Hello are palettes that everybody loves, and it's just palettes that I don't go for as much. Doesn't mean I hate it, doesn't mean it's not a good palette. Again, it's just personal preference. I feel like I gotta keep saying that because sometimes people don't listen. Like, when I say I don't use a palette, doesn't mean I don't like it. It's just I have other palettes that I like more. But what I have noticed over, you know, the past year, finding dupes and everything, I do find a lot of dupes with the You Had Me at Hello. You Had Me at Hello does come up a lot. Dream Street comes up a lot as well. I feel like these kind of neutral tones, it does pop out a lot throughout the Colourpop palette. We have I Think I Love You, which is the same packaging as Double Entendre. I wish the packaging was a little bit different for the Double Entendre so you could tell the difference between the two. But anyway, this is another palette that I don't reach for as much. This palette is a little bit more neutral. It doesn't have as many mattes. It only has 4 mattes. So the looks that you create with this palette is going to be fairly similar throughout the looks. It's just a palette I don't reach for as much. It's a little bit too neutral. I like to go for more on the warmer side, more berry side. I like to stay away from neutrals and cool tones. You know, here and there I like doing those looks, but for the most part I just don't like these cool tones on me. They pull very, very grey, and I just don't think I look the best in them. Again, it is just personal preference, but I know a lot of people do like this palette a lot. I think the shimmer shadows are really nice in this one though. And then we have Element of Surprise. This one's a little bit more brighter. I feel like this was one of the first palettes that we saw from Colourpop that had a little bit more color. I do like this one, but again, I don't reach for them as much. I felt like the first couple of launches from Colourpop with the palettes, I didn't like as much. I feel like more of the recent ones are a lot better. The color combinations just speak to me a lot more than the older ones. But again, like, it's a beautiful palette. The shades are really nice. It's just not for me for every day. If you like the colors that you see in the palettes, then obviously I would say like go ahead and buy it. It's just, again, depending on what you personally like. I only have one of the 15 pan of the like original category, which is still available. This is what it looks like. It is called the Chasing Rainbows. This was part of their holiday collection for 2018. I honestly had so much fun using this palette when I was reviewing it, and I wish I had more time to play with more of the colors. I just like the color combination here. It's just very fun. It made me play with color combinations that I usually wouldn't play with. You get your neutrals, you get your pinks, and then you get your blues, but you could mix and match and everything will look cohesive. You get a good range of mattes and shimmers. This palette I think highly of. I think it's a great colorful palette to have. You can create everyday looks with it obviously, but you can create more fun looks as well. I really do feel like it was different from the typical standard Christmas palettes. Like, this one's just fun and I just love it. And then we have these bigger palettes, which are their 16 pan. So this came together, the Fame and Fortune. When you connect them together, it's like a little circus tent, which is pretty cute. So the Fame palette is like the cool tone sister. If you are into cool tones, then this is a palette you definitely would want to get. I do think the mattes in here are a little bit too close in tone. I feel like there should have been like transitions, medium browns and darker browns, and then very dark colors to create more variety, but that's just what I personally feel like. These shimmers in here are really beautiful. Like I said, I do like to stay away from cool tones, so I don't go for this palette as much, but when I need like a cool tone palette, I'm gonna think of the Fame palette like right away. The Fortuna is a lot more brighter, a lot more pink. To me, this is kind of like an extended version of Give It To Me Straight. You get your warms, you get your berries, and it's just a very pretty palette to play with. It's very fun. Shimmer shadows for me aren't like my favorite. I personally like the shimmers more in here, but it's a great palette to combine together. Use the mattes in here, use the shimmers in here, combine them together, you get beautiful looks. I don't think these are bad palettes at all. Colourpop also has like these little 6-pan palettes as well. I haven't used any of these, so this one is pretty much, which the packaging to me is so cute. I think out of all the packaging, this gotta be in like my top 5 favorites. It just comes with like 6 cute little eyeshadows in here. I haven't used these shadows, so I don't know really what to say, and if you want to like just travel with it, that's great, you could. I am not going to swatch Make Up Your Mind just because I'm going to put this into a giveaway, but I will just show you guys what it looks like. But this one is just full of shimmers. I don't know if this one is still available, but it's just a full of metallics. You have a lot of mattes in your collection and you just want a palette that has all shimmers, you could get this one. And now we have their 9-pan palettes. So I think the theme that they are going for these little 9 pans, I think they're like trying to make like a whole rainbow. All the palettes are very monochromatic. They have a strong color theme to it, which I love. You guys know I love being monochromatic because I just like to match everything. So the first one is Ooh La La. There are some existing shades in here, some repeat shades in here as well. So you just want to be mindful. You might already own some of the single shadows that already exist in here. So just be careful, just double check what you have in your collection. I actually really like this palette because, again, when I'm going to think of like a pink palette, I'm gonna think of this one automatically. I love the tones in here. I love the neon pink. I'm actually wearing it today. I just think this is a really great pink palette to have, and it's great to have on hand. It's just good to have it all compact into one palette, and when you look at it, you just know what's going to be inside. We then have the Sol and Mar palette, which was kind of like the Fame and Fortune. It was kind of like a sister palette, if you want to say. This was for their summer collection. So the Sol palette, I'm going to be very careful opening it because one of the eyeshadows broke. For me, this is like a really great like bright summertime palette, but if I had to choose between this palette and the Yes Please, I definitely would go for the Yes Please. The Yes Please palette, you can get more of like a variety of looks. This one, you're kind of just stuck down to more like oranges. The Yes Please has a bit of yellows, orange, and red. This one is just like the mattes are very orangey base and then brown. The Mar palette, I just love so much. For me, what really stands out in this palette is definitely the middle shadow in here, which is called Gridlock. I just think it's so special, and for, I think this is $12. For $12 alone, I would just get it for this shade here. Also, this one, Highway, is really, really beautiful as well, which is very unique. I like how you just get a pop of color of blues right down here, and then around it, you just get your warms. And just most recently, they came out with this palette here, which is called It's My Pleasure. This is their purple palette, and this is actually my first time opening it. I haven't played with this one yet. I'm about to do like a through demo look. Out of everything here, this is the only palette that I don't have a review on yet, but once I upload it, I will definitely update the description box. Looking at it, it's just so pretty. It makes me feel so like comfortable looking at this, like how everything's just so monochromatic. The shimmers just look so nice, like they have so many dimensions to it. So this is the only palette that I haven't played with, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. So all of those palettes, I believe, are palettes that will stay with Colourpop forever. These are just their palettes. They are not collabs. Chasing Rainbows might be limited edition since it was part of their holiday collection. I think besides this one, everything else should just be part of Colourpop's palette range. And now I want to move on to all of the collab palettes. Colourpop loves to collab with a lot of people, which I don't mind. I love it because some of my favorite palettes are from these collabs. So I want to quickly mention the 8 pans. This was with Karushi. She has 2 collabs with them. This is the Brown Sugar. It is again in that monochromatic kind of vibe. This one is just all your neutral browns. I think this is actually a great palette to have if you want something a little bit smaller and if you want something that has a mirror. I think this is a good palette to get if you just want everyday neutrals. Get 6 mattes, 3 shimmers, which is amazing. She also came out with the She palette, which for a while was actually discontinued, but I think they are just gonna bring it back. So this one is the She palette. If you guys are familiar with me, I personally didn't like this one as much. For me, it just didn't wow me. There's only 4 mattes in here, guys. Obviously, you can use other palettes in conjunction with it, but most of the time, like 90% of the time, I just like to use one palette alone to create an eye look. Out of Karushi's collections, I definitely like Brown Sugar a lot. Definitely up my alley a lot more, performs a lot better, it just makes a lot more sense to me. So these two were part of Karushi's collabs. We then have Kathleen, who has 2 palettes as well. Zodiac was such a heavily themed palette. She did have to create shades that would suit the horoscope, so it does look a little bit sporadic, but honestly alone you can use this palette and create looks with it. I think you do get some very special shades in here. I think Pisces is definitely the standout to me, but a lot of these shades are very, very beautiful. I do like them. It's not a bad palette. Comes with a mirror, by the way. But definitely out of the 2, if I had to choose, I would go for Dream Street. I feel like after Dream Street, so many palettes look very similar to this, where it has your neutrals, your brights and your warms, and then a pop of blue. I feel like after that, a lot of palettes started looking a little bit more like this, and I always compare a lot of shades to Dream Street. This shade in the corner called Twinkle alone is already worth it. Again, packaging is beautiful, stunning. We then have Bretman's collection with Colourpop. He only has 1 collab with them, but he came out with 2 palettes. So we have the Lip palette, which to me is just like a mini version of the Yes Please palette. I did compare the Soul palette to the Yes Please, but Soul is a little bit more like orangey based, a little bit more brown, but this definitely has more of the tones of a Yes Please palette. Do see similarities with it with the yellow and just the warm reds. It's a little bit more muted, not as bright. So if you wanted to like dabble in to the Yes Please, but it's like too big of a palette, you want to try something a little bit smaller, you definitely can get this. It's a little bit more easier to take on, I guess. And then the other part of his collection was the Wet palette, which is just full of blues. The blue is very, very pretty. It does look quite similar to the one in the Ma palette. So if you are just wanting that specific shadow, I would say get the Ma palette. It does come with a mirror. It does come with Highway, which is the like teal color in there. I think both of Bretman's palettes actually are not that bad, so yeah. The next collab is with Makeup Shayla. This is her Perception palette. It does come with a mirror. This is in the 16 pan. Definitely this palette is one of my favorites. I keep it in my top drawer. It's just like a go-to palette. I love the mattes, although there aren't many mattes in here. It is enough to create a solid look, if you know what I mean. It reminds me of the Born to Run. If you are a fan of the Urban Decay Born to Run palette, you most likely will like this one as well. There's just so many pretty jewel tones in here that you can create so many looks, and I just love this one. I think Shayla did a great job with this. Another 16 pan, also from another favorite influencer, I Love Seta E. Just look at these shades, are just so beautiful. I think a lot of shades in here are unique. I almost sound like a broken record because I just been talking about this palette a lot in the past couple of weeks. The shimmer shadows in here are worth it, the pops of colors. It's just a great palette, and it's more of like a colorful palette to me, where I want to like stand out a little bit more. It's not like an everyday muted eyeshadow palette that I would use. I know I'm going to use this so much in 2019, and the last collaboration with like an influencer is the Becky G Savoir Hair palette. From everything else that has been released from Colourpop, to me this one was just a little bit meh. Although if you do want to get this palette, you won't be disappointed. Everything performs beautifully. It looks great on the eyes. We then have 2 collabs that aren't with influencers but are with like another company. So we have the My Little Pony palette, which I actually think this is discontinued, so I should put it in my discontinued category, but I'm just gonna mention it now. This palette was the palette that made me want to do 3 looks with all my videos. Like before My Little Pony, I would just do a review and just 1 look. But when I got this palette, I was so inspired by it that I wanted to create 3 looks with it, and ever since that video, I stuck to my 3 demo looks, and ever since then, you guys have been loving like my 3 demo look series, and it's all because of this palette. So this palette to me is just very special because of my 3 demo looks. I feel like my channel has grown a lot from that. To me, that already says so much on how I feel about this palette. I remember just these 3 at the bottom, these blues were just so incredibly stunning. I don't want to talk too much about it just because I'm pretty sure it's discontinued. And for the last collab, this one again is a little bit more recent. This is the Disney Designer Collection palette. It's a princess thing. I have talked about this palette a lot in the past couple of months, and as of right now, this is my top favorite palette. You can see the kind of tones that I like. I love the whole first row. Like the whole first row is just great for everyday. The shimmer shadows are not shimmer shadows that I personally would wear like on the everyday, but they are great shimmer shadows, okay? They're very, very pretty. Usually on an everyday, I don't wear shimmers just because when I'm out and about, you know, it's hot, my makeup is like going everywhere. Shimmer shadows tend to like burst out and just the glitters all over my face by the end of the day. It's like up to my brow bone at the end of the day. So I just like to stick to mattes on an everyday basis, and I just love the mattes in here. The mattes in here are just so, it's just my vibe. It is just me. You know how I only hit pan on one of these shadows, which was in the Yes Please palette? I'm pretty sure this is the next palette I'm gonna hit pan on, and I might just buy a backup. I'm pretty sure this one's gonna be discontinued fairly soon. I don't know. I don't think this one's gonna be around forever. So I might buy a backup just because I love that first row. It's just everything to me. It's in my top drawer, of course. And for my last category, I just have the discontinued palettes. So quickly, I just want to talk about these ones because this was very, very recent. It's the Rendezvous and the Sweet Nothings. These were like an exclusive to Ulta, and I realized that they don't have them on their website anymore, but a lot of the shades in here were existing shadows. You might want to just search them up. You might already own some of them. So this is the Sweet Nothings. I really like this one. It's just perfect for Valentine's Day. It gives you that very cozy and warm, lovey-dovey vibe. If you want to dupe them, you easily can. You can go see my video. I duped this one very, very easily, but nonetheless, it's a great one. I just don't want to talk about it too much because it's like discontinued. Like, what can you do? You guys can't buy it anymore. Same with Rendezvous. The closest palette to this would be Through My Eyes. So if you like the way Rendezvous looks like, then you might want to get Through My Eyes. It's like, I wouldn't say it's the same, but you will get a similar vibe. And then we have All I See Is Magic, which was their first holiday palette, which was in 2017. I just love how it says it right here. It's just kind of like a collector's item, you could say. But this again is in the same format as Chasing Rainbows, which was their other holiday palette from last year. The mattes in here is a little bit similar to the Disney Designer, where it's like that muted vibe that I like. But the shimmers in here are beautiful. I remember just really liking this palette. Definitely a palette that has a lot of shimmers, a palette that you would want to use in conjunction with other eyeshadow palettes you already have. Some of the shades in here I believe are in single shadows, and some of the shades have came out in some of these newer palettes, if you know what I mean. They did bring some of the shadows back. I am so out of breath, guys. Like, I'm sweating, my back is sore, I need a drink. There's just so many palettes. How many palettes did I talk about? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 28, 31 palettes. 31 palettes, guys. Wow. If you guys don't give this video a thumbs up, I'm gonna be sad. I'm about to swatch 31 palettes as well for you guys. But now I just want to share with you some of my favorite eyeshadow palettes. So for my favorites, I kind of split them into 2 categories. First category is like my everyday palette. The palettes that I would wear every day are suitable for every day. And then my other category is more of like the colorful pops of colors and more like creative palettes that I would use. For the everyday category, my number 1 place is the Disney Princess palette. My number 2 spot is the Give It To Me Straight. My number 3 spot is the Double Entendre. My number 4 spot is Perception, and my number 5 spot is the Dream Street. These are my top 5 everyday palettes. These are the palettes that I keep in my top drawer if I want to just go somewhere and just feel confident, comfortable. These are the shades that I can fall back on, and I know the eye looks are gonna look great. It's just great for everyday wear. These are the 5 palettes that I am going to go for. Top drawer quality palettes. And then for the colorful category, the more creative category, my number 1 spot will go to the Yes Please palette. Number 2 is the Through My Eyes I Love Cedar E palette. Number 3 is the Chasing Rainbows. Number 4 is the Ooh La La. And number 5 is the Ma palette. I do want to give an honorable mention for number 6 to the My Little Pony, although this is discontinued. Again, it's just the whole reason why I started 3 demos. So I gotta give a mention to this one. But these are my top 5 colorful palettes. If I want to play with color, I go to these. For my eye look today, which is pretty colorful to me, I actually used 3 of these palettes for this eye look. So that says a lot. I just want to say, just because I didn't mention any of the other palettes doesn't mean I don't like them. And if your favorites is not in my top favorites, that is completely fine. We all have different preferences when it comes to eyeshadow palettes. What I like on myself, you might not like on you. Like, I love warm tones. I love that muted vibe, which is really hard for me to describe. But a lot of you guys might like cool tones. So everything that I mentioned, you might absolutely hate, and you just might like the Fame palette. You might like the Wet palette. You know what I mean? So everyone is different. Just because my favorites is not your favorites, you know, like, it's not that deep. You can like what you like, and I'm gonna like what I like. You know, I'm just giving you guys my recommendations because that is a question that I get asked very, very frequently. Let me know your top 5. Your top 5 every day, your top 5 colorful, or your top 5 in general. I just want to thank you guys so much for watching and supporting all of my Colourpop videos and reviews. So with that being said, again, thank you so much for watching. I love you, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!